Luke Wyckoff. I don't even know where to start with you, man. Let's see. You're an entrepreneur, social media genius, photographer extraordinaire. You've come a lot of places in your life, man.
My mother paid you a lot of money to be able to say those very kind things. So I will thank her when I get home to Michigan for Christmas.
It's just your history. I mean, am I missing anything? Am I missing anything from that list?
No, a lot of those would be pretty accurate,
right?
For the most part.
Well, let's start with photography. Tell me your beginnings. I know I was kind of reading about how you got your first camera. Can you tell me about that story?
Yeah, that was back in like the early 80s.
Yeah.
So I was really excited to grab a camera and start. Minolta X700 was my very first camera. And back when I guess Minolta used to make cameras.
Right.
And I started shooting. I would photograph everything from going to summer camp to different stuff at school. And then I got asked to do the photography for a calendar. And so it was a women's group that was attached to the Lions Club, very good organization here in the United States. They were putting together a calendar called The Men About Town, and it was a parody or a spoof on the men who lived in my little hometown in Michigan. And what they would do is they would kind of make fun of each of their professions and take a funny photo of it, put it into a calendar, and then sell that calendar as a fundraiser.
Right.
Well, the editor of the newspaper of the next town over, when I say next town, it was a much bigger town.
Right.
She saw that calendar and she flat out asked, who did these photos? And they're like, it was this 17-year-old kid. She's like, I want to meet him. And so her name was Sylvia Warner, and with the Greenville Daily News, she brought me in, and we had a wonderful conversation, and I went out on assignment as a freelancer in the late 80s and started doing some photojournalism. And as that began to grow, she said, would you like a more full-time position? And so I guess when you say as a photographer that you went pro, the first time someone actually paid you for a photo, that would have been 1987. And I started in the world of photojournalism. And I got mentored by Dave Burdett, one of the better photographers that I had worked with for many years. He taught me how to do darkroom work, taught me how to do all of the different things you can do for photography, everything from how do you find a feature story to how do you do sports? How do we turn that around quickly, because you're going to go to print tomorrow. Right. What's that photo that's going to be there? So he kind of taught me everything, which was awesome, because that's really where the grounding of the photography started. Now, if I could pontificate for a moment and tell you what it's like to work in a newspaper environment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Think about what sells newspapers.
Stories.
Yeah, but what type of stories? What leads? NBC Nightly News? What leads CNN? What leads Fox? Right? What leads the New York Post or the Times or something?
Right.
Is it a feel-good story?
Not usually.
It leads.
No.
Well, then what do you think a photographer has to photograph every day?
Did you see some violent stuff?
Tragedy. It's just tragedy.
Right.
Because in an old, very old newspaper world, we used to say if it bleeds, it leads. Yeah. Okay? So if it's tragedy and it's sad, it's going to be front page news tomorrow.
Yeah, 100%.
Because that's what does what? Sells papers. And when papers sell, what happens? Advertising dollars come in.
Right.
It's what fuels the beast. So, those type of things just happen. So, I was kind of in photography trained in tragedy. Trained to look for it, trained to be on site. When my pager went off, it wasn't going to be good. Right, there was going to be a fatal car accident. It was going to be a drowning. It was going to be a suicide. It was going to be a shooting.
And how old were you when you were photographing all
17.
this? 17,
18. So from I was pro in that space until 1993. I worked for the Greenville Daily News, the Big Rapids Pioneer. I worked with Ferris State University in photography, but also with the Grand Rapids Press, the Detroit Free Press, and probably the biggest story I ever had was the Central Michigan versus Western Michigan riots. There was a riot after the football game, and I was right in the middle of that riot. Now, with a little asterisk, I was
Right.
actually at a party. Okay.
So you were kind of part of the riots.
I was kind of maybe part of the problem,
Right.
a little bit of the solution, but definitely more part of the problem.
Right.
But when that riot broke out, I was right in the middle of it. And even in a slightly inebriated state, I was able to get to the trunk of my car, grab out all my equipment, and I was the only photographer that captured that entire riot. And that story went over 3,800 newspapers across the United States within about 12 hours, and all those photos were mine. So if you had a breakthrough moment, it was the Central Western riots that really took me to the next level. And then honestly, in 1993, I put down the camera for 23 years.
Why?
I stopped. You know what, Sterling, it was, I had really been photographing a lot of tragedy.
Right.
A lot of people see photographers, right? And especially in the newspapers, and when you're kind of an all-around photographer, you did it all. So what you got to see, the coolest part, I'm backstage with Def Leppard.
Right.
Right? I am sidelines for the Detroit Tigers. I'm right on the rink side for the Red Wings. You get to see the sexy part
Right.
of photography, which only makes up about 10%.
Wow.
The rest of what I was doing was tragedy. And the last thing I photographed before I hung up the camera for 23 years was a child drowning. It was a 6-year-old girl. And I'm in the bucket over the river with the fire department as they're pulling the body out of the river, and there's her mother standing right there with the mother's hands out, right? And I'm capturing that photo, and I had this moment of consciousness where I was like, I'm about ready to make this woman's worst day of her life be front page story for everyone in the nation to see. And it was kind of at that point that I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I could never internalize those types of things like a fireman or a police officer or an EMT. I never really internalized it. Like, they see this every day,
Right.
and I'm capturing it to resell that story.
Yeah, it's different than those EMTs because they're doing it to sort of help the person, but you're different because you're doing it for this organization and to get the news out there. That's kind of, yeah. I mean, did you feel skeezy in that way at times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was many times when I was not comfortable with what I was about ready to photograph, knowing what was going to be done with these photos.
Right.
I love the concerts, right? I loved, the 80s and 90s music that I got to photograph. I love sports. I loved feature, interesting features. They'd send you out to go do that type of photography. And that type of stuff was fun.
But it was like you said, 1 in 10 times.
Yeah, that was about a 10th.
Yeah.
Because that's not what sells newspapers. Okay, that's not what keeps the engine going.
That's what you find on page 8 when you're scrolling through, on
Yep.
breakfast. Yeah.
And there's the great photo of the new restaurant opening.
Yeah.
When they're cutting the ribbon.
Yeah.
Types of shots. Those feel good. Types of stories. Those don't happen. They're not going to make the front page.
Right.
That's not going to be the thing that sells newspapers. And in a digital world, it's not so dissimilar.
Yeah.
You wonder why there's not more digital newspapers or blogs or other types of things that are getting, millions and millions of hits. We as a society have really, I want that drama.
Yeah.
I need to be fed that type of digital drama in my life every day.
What do you think it is? Is it like that morbid curiosity?
It's the same reason why we slow down and look when we pass a auto accident.
Yeah.
It's just curiosity. It's like you don't want to look at it, but you can't not look at it. And so in 1993, I put the camera down. I said, I'm done. I'm done with this. And I kind of made a commitment at that point that I would never do it again, which I totally went back on 23 years later.
Right. So let's then, so you put the camera down. Did you then sort of decide I'm going to go into business and whatever that means? So what was your first business after sort of giving up photography in your mind forever?
Yeah. When I put that camera down, I said, you know what? I'm going to go actually use my degree.
Right.
from Ferris State. Ferris State, great university, great people, a wonderful staff, great executive team.
I think you had it on your license plate, right?
I did. I did. It's I'm very blessed to be an alumni of that university. When a lot of other universities didn't give me a chance, they did. They gave me an opportunity to come. A very hands-on school. It's up in Big Rapids, Michigan, and when I left Ferris, it was in 1993. Very difficult economy that was going on, and I kind of took that first position that was offered because not a lot of jobs were out there. And so I got to work for a company called Wallace Computer Services, and I went into sales. Nice. Dunder Mifflin. So if you're a big fan of a big fan of The Office, that's what I did. I sold paper in an environment that was kind of very similar to, but not dissimilar to, the show The Office.
Right.
Where I was one of the guys that went out, called on companies, and I sold paper and labels.
Yep.
And I sold those. I did that for a couple of years, and it was that was that first job out of college. I can also say that I met with and got to work with some of the finest people, and one of the better salespeople that I ever got to work with. Dave Arnswald was his name, and talk about like an older, the Obi-Wan Kenobi of The Office, right? And he was so smart and wise. And if I had very small regrets, like I always say with Sinatra, regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. One of them would have been I would have sat more on Dave's arm and watch how he developed relationships and how he sold. He was one of the better guys in that space. Mm-hmm. And it was great. It was a good experience. But after a couple of years, I knew it was time for a change.
So did that give you, like, you were making commission? You were making commission off the sales you made? Or
I was.
So was that kind of like your first taste into, like, what commission-based, like, money making could do for you?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it was a big deal back then to have a job that paid a base and would pay commissions. And I think I have to look back. I think my base salary there was $18,000 a year. And
That's crazy.
And then you made commissions on top of that. But, if you could go back and talk to that level of Luke, it was, what it gave me, Sterling, was that it gave me the confidence and the tenacity and the resilience there's many days you'd make 40, 50 calls in a day live. I mean, you're not on the phone. You are going door to door to these companies going, let's talk about paper. Yeah. Right. let's talk about a commodity that you're going to be using. And you would get no, yes, no. And you just live for the yeses. Mm-hmm. And you had to get past the animosity and the fear that you would have of of knocking on that door and getting in front of somebody.
Not a lot of people are able to do that. You take that, not only just put yourself out there to people you don't know, but also take that many no's for so long, because it does, to build that confidence. You're not going to see a yes for a while you're building that confidence and that repertoire to sell. Did your background taking morbid photos and just really sort of being like instilled into that world sort of like shape your perspective?
It did. When you're doing a lot of tragedy, the rest of the world starts to look a little more rosy. Right. So, the big thing that I would, as I coach and mentor folks that are in sales roles today, I remind them all the time, a no is not a personal no. They're not personally attacking you.
Right.
If I had one word of advice, and I have many for the next generation, this generation that's coming out of high school, out of college right now, that are probably 30 and under, is when people say no or they're giving you feedback, many times it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's very specific to something, but they tend to really internalize it and take it like that's me. No, that's not you. It was your actions or your activities, right? But, it was easy to take no for an answer multiple times and then be able to come right back and knock it out of the park. But I did that job for 2 years, and then I kind of felt like I was being called for something more.
Right. What were you looking at? Did you did you have an idea to get into marketing and sales, or what did you approach?
It was at that time. It was around 1995, and I was thinking to myself, I feel like I'm worth more than what I'm doing right now. Like maybe my calling in life was a little bit more than selling paper. I'm just guessing. Just guessing.
Right.
Not that the product wasn't bad, and the people I worked with were actually really great people. But I kind of felt like I was put on this earth maybe to do a little bit more. So I put myself through an exercise. And in this exercise, I didn't expect this exercise to come, but I was sitting on the beach in Grand Haven, Michigan. I was watching the boats come in. It was beautiful, sunset in Grand Haven, Michigan, and watching the boats come in. And I pulled out a yellow sheet of paper, and I made 3 columns. In the first column, I put down, here's the things that I love to do. And in the second column, I put, here's the things I'm really good at. And the third column was, here's the stuff that I'm not good at and I never want to see again in a job or a career. 3 simple columns. What do you love to do? What are you good at? Okay?
Right.
And then what do you never want to see again? And I just started filling that out. And what I used that for, Sterling, was a bullet point of exactly where I wanted to look for my next career had better fit something very similar to what those 3 columns would have lined up for.
Yeah. Because why not? You know, why you got to keep chasing things you don't want to do? And it's good that you're actually visualizing, you know, manifesting in a lot of ways, putting out into the world what you want.
Yep, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I thought to myself, if I wanted to just go find any job, there's a lot of jobs out there. But if you're going to find a job that maps into where your strengths are, what you love to do, and it minimizes the stuff that you don't want to be doing anymore, then it's a win-win for the company and it's a win for me.
Right.
Right? And so I went out there and I looked at multiple opportunities. Went to the finals on quite a few interviews, and at the end of the day, came down to 3 offers. The first offer was $50,000 a year base plus a capped commission, but you also got a car allowance, okay? Because back then, pharmaceuticals, Dodge Intrepid, everybody if you drove a Dodge Intrepid, you must have been a pharmaceutical rep.
Right.
Number 1. Second opportunity, $55,000 a year, also capped commissions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you're only going to make so much, and that would have been and also came with a car. The third opportunity was $30,000 a year, no car, uncapped commissions.
Well, you went with the third one, right?
Damn straight I
Damn
did.
straight,
Damn straight I did.
Because you said, look at myself. You know, what? You're not even 30 yet at this point, right?
I'm 25 years old.
You're 25,
I'm 25, and
yeah.
I'm looking at this and going, you know, if and I get scared that a lot of people go for the money and they don't have those 3 columns. You hold that 3 columns up to all 3 of those opportunities, it was a no-brainer that the number 3 option, though it was, you know, $20,000 less in base, but uncapped commissions.
Right.
You know, you look at that and go, you know what, but it aligned better with those 3 columns. It had less of what I didn't want to do. It had a lot of what I was good at and what I loved to do. I ended up being with that company for 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
What were you doing there?
That company was called DDI, Development Dimensions International, one of the best leadership and management development trainings on the globe. Nice. And probably some of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my life, barring none. I was mentored, coached, developed, started off in sales, in a sales role capacity. So I was out working with companies that wanted to develop their leaders, have them be better at everything from how do you select people to come into a company to how do you develop them, how do you coach, how do you mentor, how do you have a tough conversation with someone, how do you develop a team where you're not the alpha in the room.
Right.
You know, there's all these different scenarios and situations, and DDI had great products and solutions for each of those, and they had a lot of stuff they dealt in. The 3 big ones I worked in were leadership development, selection and assessment technologies, and executive assessment.
Wow.
And all 3 of those topic areas, not only did I have an interest in,
Right.
but the people who led each of those groups were not just the alpha in their space. They were the alpha in the industry, like across the world. So I find myself, Sterling, working with some of the smartest people, PhDs in industrial and organizational psychology. And I just sat on the back of these people and just got to listen and learn and then practice. Listen, learn, practice, listen, learn, practice. Grew that business, tripled it in my area, my territory, to the point where they came to me in 1999 with an opportunity in Denver, Colorado, and said, "Would you like to help run? You did really well with half of the state of Michigan. How about running 5 states?" And I said, "Okay, Denver, huh?" Well, they gave me the opportunity of Vegas, Salt Lake City, or Denver. Were my 3 options.
You chose Denver.
Well, single at age 29, send me to Vegas. It wasn't going to end up pretty.
No. And you were also having problems with substances and alcohol at that time. Right?
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't have never admitted it, but I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
That would have been a really. I probably wouldn't be sitting here if I would have chosen Vegas.
Yeah.
I did like Salt Lake City. I wasn't sure how well I would have fit in with the culture of Salt Lake City. It was a beautiful place.
Yeah.
But, growing up when all the rest of the kids would go to Sanibel Island or down to Fort Lauderdale, me and my buddies, we'd come skiing.
Yeah.
So I'd never even seen Denver, by the way.
Before you moved here?
Before I moved here. Because every time, and I've been to Colorado 3 times, I'd skip right by Denver. It was like a little sub on the map. I'd glance and go, "Oh, there's Denver. I'm on I-70, right?"
Yeah.
Straight to Keystone, straight to Vail, straight to Aspen, right? Boom. You would so that I had really never seen Denver, and then moved here in 1999 to help grow the company a little bit more.
Yeah. So you did that then, right? You came here to Denver, and you continue to work with them up until the thousands, or almost.
I did. There was a point though when I felt like, and I think everybody in their career starts to get to a point where they're like, been there, done that.
Anywhere for over a decade,
Yeah, for a long time.
A decade's a long time. Yeah.
You've seen it all, and there's not like new conversations that are coming into play, and it's almost like when in the first 3 minutes of any meeting, I already have the solution designed in my head.
Right.
Not that it got that easy, but it was very predictable, and I wasn't growing. And as a lifelong learner, I knew there needed to be a next step. So I decided I either needed to go find another career, or I need to do something to mentally stimulate my brain. And that's when I went to the University of Colorado into their executive MBA program and took a 2-year where I worked full-time and was school full-time and graduated from that program in 2004, then stayed with the company for 2 more years to 2006 is when I ended up finally leaving DDI. And it was not a bad leave.
Right.
It was, in fact, many of the people at DDI today are still some of my absolute best friends. And I'm talking from the top of the organization through people that have still been gone for 10, 15 years. It makes me shake my head to think that coming into 2021, I will have been gone from that company for 15 years.
It's crazy.
When I literally, in the back of my mind, still think of them as coworkers and still think of them as some of my dearest and best friends, and I've been gone for a long time.
That says a lot, though. That says a lot about what a DDI. But I also want to say, so you went to get your master's after you moved on from DDI, but it sounds like you got a lot of education from that business and working with the market leaders. So but you really felt like the master's was able to push you in ways that you haven't been pushed before still?
It was. For someone who was very independent, who worked out of his home,
right?
I didn't have to be around coworkers and employees. And in fact, for a long time, I think I held a beautiful badge of DDI's located in Bridgeville, Pennsylvania. I think I held the badge for working for DDI the longest and not visiting the mothership, right? Not heading back. So I was very independent, could work without people around me, without a lot of supervision. And then when I got into grad school, I realized there's a lot of really, really smart people out there. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was just shifted, not just from first gear into second gear. It was more like second gear into fifth gear by spending time with some of the smartest people. And they were, CFOs and CEOs and all these other people. And I was kind of young for the program.
Yeah.
I started when I was 32, graduated when I was 34. And some of these people, the average age in the room was about 44. And they were already executives moving into senior executive roles, respectively, in each of those groups. They were really, really smart people. And I just sat there like a sponge, just absorbed. So here I am. I've got the DDI executives and people, and I'm just still sponging and learning from them. Then all these grad school people where I'm sponging and learning from them, and I'm just feeling myself move mentally, intellectually into a whole different gear.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk then about your gear into social media energy. Let's get into that because we talked about all of this, like how you really got this business experience, and this is all like pre-internet. This is no social media really. I mean, there's internet, but not what it is today.
Yeah, not even close.
And so, what was the point when you looked at the internet and looked at social media and said like, this is gonna be something? This isn't just for kids,
Right. Yeah, this isn't gonna be. I mean, I was one of the first users of MySpace, back in the late 90s, because MySpace originally was designed for musicians.
Late 90s?
Yeah.
That was when MySpace started?
Oh, yeah. I'm a musician.
Yeah.
It was originally designed for musicians to do dump data files back and forth to each other. That's originally what it was designed for.
So they could like work on songs together?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's exactly what it was designed for.
Yeah.
And so I was an early, if you want to call early adopters,
right?
I would say I was an OG of that MySpace OG, and I thought that I'm like, this is really cool technology, which still wasn't even in the infancy, in the beginning stages. I had already started Wyckoff. So when I left DDI, I did Wyckoff Consulting, where I was helping with human resources issues within companies, and did that for a couple of years. And then I was in presenting to the senior management team of Health One, which is a local hospital group here. They've got 13 major facilities here in Colorado. And I had all the CEOs in the room, and we were talking about succession management and executive assessment, all part of my consulting with no other better name, Wyckoff Consulting, whatever we call it. But I was meeting and talking with them, having this wonderful conversation. And one of the CEOs from Rose Medical Center, he said, "You started your whole company using LinkedIn and Facebook, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." He goes, "What is that stuff?" And I looked around the room, I'm like, "You guys want to know what that is?" And they're all like, "Yeah." So I got up on the whiteboard and I whiteboarded out a 3-month strategy for Health One. And I get done with the presentation, and one of the CEOs, Jeff, who was the CEO over the whole system, says, why don't you just do that for us? And I said, "Do what?" He's like, "All that stuff you just said you could do." And I didn't say I could do it. I'm like, "This is what you should be doing." He goes, "Yeah, we don't really have anybody who knows how to do that here. Would you just do that for us?" I said, "So before we all walk out of the room, we're all going to get on the same page. You want to outsource your social media to me like you outsource accounting or IT?" He's like, "Yep." He's like, "Let me think about that." So Sterling and I went and got my study group together from grad school. Now, remember, I'm still drinking at this point. Right. So, bribing them with single malt scotch has got to be like the easiest thing in the world to do. We pro forma out the entire company. I walk it back into Health One, and they said, "Yep, let's do it." And I remember distinctly walking out of the room thinking, I don't have a name for this company. I don't have a website. I don't have a phone number. I don't have an email address. I don't have a logo. I mean, I've got it's people who start companies. Usually they have a lot of those things lined up maybe before they started their company.
At least a name, right?
Yeah. I had none of that. What I had was a concept, and what I had, and this is what I teach entrepreneurs and business owners. None of that other stuff matters if you don't have the most critical thing, which is a paying customer. Right? Someone who will pay the bills for the vision or the product or service that you've developed, right? And they became our very, very first customer. Our second customer behind that was Time Warner Telecom. Third customer, Remax Corporate Headquarters. Fourth customer, Sports Authority. Yeah. So within a matter of 6 weeks, we had landed 4 of the biggest named companies, really, in all of Colorado. And that's what really started the company and burst it open and allowed SME to grow. And tell you what, I'm blessed. We're going to be going into our 12th year starting this spring. Fired myself years ago, put in a much better CEO than me to run the day-to-day operations. You learn that as a visionary leadership and as an idea person. You may be the right person to come up with the idea and find a market for that, but you may not be the best person to implement it. And in my years of wisdom, that's one thing that I've learned, especially about myself. I know exactly where my weaknesses are, and I surround myself with people who are much stronger than me in each of those spaces, and then it's a win-win for everybody.
That's important. A lot of people will sort of bang their heads on a wall time and time again trying to fix these weaknesses in themselves. Sometimes it's not. Number one, sometimes it's not so easy to fix those weaknesses. And number two, why do that when you can get somebody who, excels in those areas already, I look at the same way in terms of relationships, finding a girlfriend. You don't want, a girl or a guy, whatever, that, matches the same things you do. You want to be able to feel yourself out in different ways and complete sort of a life together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hell, I think in my world, if she could beat me on the golf course, I might as well put the 3-carat ring on her hand now. Maybe she can make me a better golfer.
Don't tell me about golfing then. Golfing is pretty interesting. I wasn't into it when I was younger, but now I'm kind of realizing that it's like a long-term mental game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another one of the big 5 regrets that I've had in life. Mm-hmm. One would have been not golfing more when my grandfather, when he was really interested in teaching me the game. Right. I could have been, I think, a much better golfer today. I'm like a 22 handicap, which means I'll shoot about a 98 on any course that I play, which it keeps you respectable. Allows you to play client golf,
right?
And still be okay. You're not going to crush other people, but you're not going to look like a fool either. I'm kind of like right there in the middle.
Just where you need to be.
Yeah. But for those people who are in business development, who are in sales roles, very few tools in my life have been stronger than the golf course.
Wow. And
one of the ways that I've done that I've been able to monetize my relationships, is I would call, or I would find somebody in my Rolodex who was a current client of mine, and I would say to him or her, who in my Rolodex would you like to meet? And, we'd start talking about it a little bit, and then I'd figure out who that person is, who's the golfer.
Right.
And I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to invite them. Now in your Rolodex, here's who I would like to meet.
Oh, my LinkedIn connections,
The LinkedIn
whatever the new Rolodex is, right?
Whatever the new Rolodex is. Yeah. For those of you who are listening who don't know what a Rolodex is, I get it. I understand. But I would then ask them to invite the other person to a foursome.
Right.
And then to a foursome, and then we'd all go out golfing together, all 4 of us, right? Me with my client with the person I wanted to meet, and the person who I brought is the person my client wanted to meet. It is a win-win-win-win, okay? And I would sit back and never even talk about business. And I promise you, by the 14th hole, people are like, you know what? We need to have a meeting outside of this golf thing because we want to talk more about what you're doing.
Right.
Never have to sell, never have to talk. You let your clients and your friends do that for you.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of client golf.
Because selling isn't about selling. It's about building relationships over time and giving them a product that's good. Yep. That's why I appreciate Social Media Energy. You guys were in 2008, you said? That's when you guys were founded? 2007?
We started in 2008.
Yeah. Basically ground level in terms of social media management. There were not a lot of players in the game. Like YouTube started then, I think.
Yeah, there were 6 players that all started in Denver about the same time that I started, and not one of those companies are here today.
Right.
Not one of them are still going and up and running.
Well, because they saw the opportunity, they just didn't have the ability to implement it in the same way that you did because you had this whole business background.
I had a strong business background, and I didn't try to be – this is one of my secrets that I don't tell like everybody, but now I do.
It's all mine now.
Because it's all good now. But try not to be all things to all people. It's okay to say no to a piece of business that doesn't look good. Mm-hmm. Like that's not going to be a great piece of business for us. But man, when you're scrapping in the beginning, you'll try to take, anything and everything and go, but that's money. Hey, it's money. We need money. Yeah, but is it good money? Mm-hmm. Is it going to take you? And what that did is it took a lot of those companies down rabbit holes that they could never get out of because they tried to be all things to all people. Right. And that ends up being why a lot of those companies are not in business today. But yeah, so that's where kind of that's where the second business.
That's cool. Well, let's go back into your second era of photography then, because like you picked it up after not thinking you would do it for over 2 decades, and you had a lot of success with it.
It has been. So it was 2016, and I got asked to be the advisor to the executive MBA program for CU, which was an honor. And I was excited at the same time. And I remember talking with the person who was heading up the program at the time. And one of the things that I would be doing as part of that is traveling with the students, because part of the capstone class for the executive MBA program at CU is you go overseas.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
And you're going to study and look at the dichotomy and the differences in the culture of the way you do business. So when I went through the program, and I graduated in 2004, I started off in Vienna, Austria, and was studying with 3 or 4 big companies and executives there, and then stayed there for 4 or 5 days, and then hopped over to Budapest, Hungary, who interestingly enough at that time in the world had recently joined the European Union, and studied with 4 or 5 companies there. And when you're looking at distribution, marketing, finance, all of these different areas, right? And you're looking at it from 2 completely different cultures.
Right.
Then that's what you write your paper on, is here's where my assumptions and thoughts were, and you're looking at it from an American's perspective. So you've got your perspective, here is the perspective of the folks in Vienna, and here are the perspectives of the folks in Hungary. And you're writing your paper on the differences between how business gets done in each of those environments. Well, part of the being the advisor to the program is I'm going to be traveling overseas with the classes when they go overseas. And the very first one, I said, so where's the first one? We're going to start off in Berlin, Germany. I'm like, oh, great, I'm going back to my motherland. I'm excited, as a German,
right.
Wyckoff, Wyckoff. We're going to head back to the motherland, which will be fun. And then they're going to end up in Cape Town. And I looked at him, and I looked at him, and I said, Cape Town? He's like, yeah. I'm like, we're going to South Africa? He's like, yeah, we're going to South Africa. I said, do you have on this trip, do you have a safari or anything planned, for the students? He's like, yeah, we've got 2 of them planned. And I looked right at him, and I dropped the F-bomb, man. I did it. I'm like, we're going to South Africa? He's like, yeah. Well, then it took me back to 1993 when I put the camera down. I was going to go one of 3 different places. I was going to stay on the photojournalism. I was going to go straight into National Geographic, or I wanted to go Sports Illustrated. Mm-hmm. It was going to be one of those 3 places. The child drowning, I'm like done with photojournalism. I just needed a break. Put the camera down. 23 years later, 2016, I am sitting, this offer comes up, and I am thinking to myself, if there was ever a moment in time that I was going to jump back into photography, it damn straight better will be if I'm going to be on a safari, right? If we're going to be on a safari.
Traveling the world, not just on the safari. Yeah.
So I remember the conversation distinctly where I am, so every Tuesday, Lauren is the one who runs Social Media Energy. And she has the credit card, I have the credit card, right? And I remember distinctly having the conversation with her, because we have our Tuesday afternoons State of the Union, where we run through the financials of the company. And we get through all this different pieces, and then she's like, is there anything else you want to talk to me about? And I'm like, nope. And she's like, are we really going to go there? Do I really just have to put it out there? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. She goes, I am looking at a receipt from Mike's camera off of Colorado Boulevard for $16,200 of Nikon equipment. And I looked at her and I went, oh, yeah, I'm back.
I'm back, baby.
I'm back, baby. And it was at that exact moment that I looked and I said, if I'm going to come back in, I'm jumping back in at the top of my game. Now, keep in mind, everything was new.
Yeah.
And everything was different.
Yeah, because you were used to like the dark rooms.
I'm a dark room. I'm a dark room guy. I'm a film guy. Had never used a digital camera. In fact, at this point, I had already become sober, which is a different story. Right. But I had invited over the interns that worked for SME at that time, and I actually bribed them with scotch again to teach me the technology. I walked in and here's all these camera equipment sitting out, and they're looking at me like, are you just, because no one knew that I was a photographer.
Right.
I never brought it up. I never talked about it.
Really?
That I used to be a pro, ever, with anybody. And all of a sudden, sitting on this table is like 16 grand worth of Nikon equipment. And they're like, I can imagine what they were probably thinking, right? What idiot goes out and it's like you could barely drive a car and you just bought a Ferrari. Right? And now you want us to tell you how to take it out on the track. That's probably, in their mind what they're thinking. And I said, all you need to do is show me a couple of small little things, and I think I got it from here. Mm-hmm. And that's all I needed, was just to know the basics of the digital world.
How to navigate the menus and whatnot.
Yep. You did not have to teach me how to take a picture. Right. You had to teach me this new digital world. Because it's a whole generation that completely flip-flopped me.
Did you learn how to use Lightroom?
Lightroom, Adobe and all those things. Yeah. But imagine someone going from a VCR, right? From a VCR to, a Comcast or a dish.
Netflix.
Netflix. and you hand them, here's a VCR, and all of a sudden you hand them a remote of today and go, you're jumping from that technology to this technology, and you missed everything along the way.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was feeling. But when I got back from that trip and the photos that I had shot and taken were
they were
unbelievable.
They really were.
They were unbelievable.
I'll try and get our editor to pull some up from your photos because I really do seeing some of your pictures are crazy, like the children and the animals of Africa.
Yeah,
it's really beautiful.
And since then, I've gotten overseas and visited 13 countries in the last 5 years. Last year, I was in Jordan, Greece, Israel, South Africa, Vietnam, Japan. I lived with an African tribe for 10 days.
Wow.
I've done some crazy stuff. Now, with the camera, I lived with the poorest of the poor of the lowest caste systems of India. And so my thought process, Sterling, coming back into photography was, I'm done with tragedy.
Right.
Okay, there will be no tragedy. My role with photography is I'm going to show the world how beautiful of a place we live in. No matter where we are, I'm going to photograph and I'm going to bring beauty back into this world. When a lot of the riots and the things happened over this past year in Denver and other places, I had a lot of friends who knew my background, and they're like, how are you not in the middle of that action? How are you not in the middle of those riots?
Well, because that brings you back to your first big break, right? Exactly.
But it also brings me back to exactly where I never wanted to be in photography again, where some people will see the beauty of those and other people will see the tragedy of that. And I needed to be on the beauty side. I needed to be on the side that shows just how gorgeous this place is. And I've learned and I've grown so much more as a human since I've had that camera back in my hand. And I think it really sums up, it was probably the third year going on the trips with the executive MBA program. One of the students looked at me one day, and I had a shorter lens, a 28 to 80 on one side, D5, Nikon D5, and then the 8D10 on the other side with the 80 to 200.
Right.
And on both. And she said, you yield these lenses and these cameras when you're with us and you're walking around and you're capturing these. She goes, you yield them like Luke Skywalker, right, with his lightsaber.
Right.
She goes, it looks like it's another appendage, right? It just you handle everything around. It's part
natural.
of you. It's natural. It's part of you. She goes, are you sure this is not what you were meant to always do? And I said, I do love to do it, And then, then I started having people ask where they could buy my prints, where they could buy my stuff.
Isn't that crazy?
That I never saw coming, nor was I prepared for it in any way. And I thought about it, and I prayed about it, and I said, you know what? Everybody deserves to have my prints. Mm-hmm. And what I decided was, if someone wants these prints, if they make a donation to their favorite charity, I'll just give you the original. I'll give you the original digital file.
Wow.
And you can have it printed.
Is that still true?
Absolutely.
Still true. Message you on Instagram. Find any picture you want. Donate to charity.
Donate it to your charity. If you don't have one, the Denver Rescue Mission is mine, locally, that I work with. And if someone makes a donation to their favorite charity, it could be $20, it could be $200, it could be $2,000. I don't care. I want to make this world a more beautiful place. You can have that picture in Bali of the fishermen at 4:30 in the morning with the net in the air, capturing that moment. If that is a picture that brings you solitude, make a donation to the charity of your choice, and I'm happy to give you that digital image.
So do you feel almost that these pictures aren't yours and almost like you're just capturing moments that happen? Like, do you feel almost bad to sell people like these things?
No, because as an entrepreneur and as a businessman, I do have a sign in my bathroom that says, "Without margin, there is no mission."
Without margin, there is no mission.
Without margin, there is no mission.
That's awesome.
And it's I'm not a hobbyist photographer. I'm very good at this, but you know what? Lenses don't just show up on Christmas morning.
No.
Just an FYI, they don't just pop in and go, "Oh, look at that! That's a $4,500 lens that just happened to sit." Thank you, Santa. Thank you. It's a Christmas miracle. Yeah,
that's how a lot of people think of photography, though.
Exactly, it just pops in like that, right? It's just not like that, at all. So no, I don't have any issue with that. I did have a really interesting moment. Where, and this is a little spiritual moment, where I was up in the mountains, and I normally always have my camera with me.
Right.
Always. It's kind of with me, not knowing where I'm going to capture.
Second appendage, like you were saying. Yeah.
Yep, I always have it with me. And I'm right there on this trail, and this moose walks out. And it was just like the granddaddy of all moose.
Yeah.
And I'm, it's almost like you're reaching for your camera, and it's not there. And I had a moment where I literally felt God's voice say to me, "Not every moment needs to be photographed, Luke. I have moments that I want you. This moment was for you. This was not for everybody else. This was your moment, and I want you to enjoy it. You don't have to capture this. It doesn't need to be photographed for everybody else. This is your moment." And I've had, I would say, at least 3 or 4 of those moments per year since I've picked that camera back up.
Wow.
And every time I hear that voice, it says, this moment wasn't for everybody else. This one was for you.
Right. But you put yourself into so many more of those moments, trying to search for it, where you're like, no, you know what? This one's for me. And it's gone in your mind saying that truly.
Yeah. This moment's mine.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk a little bit more, because you said when you were younger you had this dream of being published in National Geo and Sports Illustrated, and that those things actually happened, right?
Some things did happen, yeah. And we won't bring up the published in Playboy, because that was 1989, and we don't talk about that one anymore.
Well, you just did.
But I just did, and there it's out there.
So you're published in Playboy.
But that was, Sports Illustrated would pick up, little things here and there. Stringers. You have to remember, like in the National Geographic world, just because they picked up a photo, you're in a stringer world of Nat Geo, and Nat Geo's published and put my photos out there a few times. But in the world of National Geographic, there's only 8. Like, there's the big 8 photographers that are being paid. They're sponsored by Nikon, sponsored by Canon. You got like the big 8. So when someone says they're a photographer for National Geographic, they're probably more in my realm, which is I'm one of the 2,500 to 5,000 people out here that get picked up every once in a while. I'm not one of the 8.
Right. I mean, you're still way and above pretty much everybody else in the photography. You're like top 5%, even if you're not top 1%, you're like top 5.
I appreciate that. It's a lot of fun. I mean, again, I look for that beauty, and I've had moments where that were like literally my heart was racing so hard. And I'll tell you one of those stories if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
It was in Africa. The number one animal in the world. What do you think the number one animal is in the world that kills people? What do you think it is?
A giraffe? Lions?
Interesting.
Lions? Or no. I bet it's like a snake or a spider or something.
It's a mosquito.
It's a mosquito.
So mosquito kills the most.
I was close.
People, right? Number 2, hippopotamus. Yeah, very angry animal, but nothing compares to number 3, which is the scariest animal I've ever photographed. And even to tell you the story, I'm already like literally starting to sweat. And it's not because the light's in here. I mean, even just thinking about it.
Right.
It's good. It's the Cape buffalo. The Cape buffalo is the scariest animal I've ever. Lions are very lazy, by the way.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if we're on kind of an animal Nat Geo topic here, lions are cheetahs are a little more scary. The mama lions are very scary
because you've dealt with all these animals in their natural habitats. Taking photos of them.
Yep. Yeah, where it's very, very natural. But the Cape buffalo. So it's me and another photographer. We're in the back of In your mind, you're thinking a safari. You're thinking Jurassic Park,
right?
Right. The Mercedes-Benz Jeep, super Jeep. Types of in reality it's more like an 1978 S10, and you're in the back of this 1978 S10, and the driver, who's also the gentleman who's helping guide you navigating. This guy's been doing it for like 35 years, right? And we come across this group of Cape buffalo. And we come pulling in really slow, and at this point I'm using an f8 400 millimeter lens.
Okay, so you're pretty far back.
I'm far enough back, but the photos I'm getting are pretty unbelievable.
Right.
It doesn't matter at that point. So we're getting these photos. And the guy turns around to us. He goes, I've been doing this for like 35 years. He goes, I am never, ever comfortable at this moment. I said, and I'm like, why? He's like, that animal scares me the most of any animal in the jungle. I'm like, why? He's like, they're just angry.
Angry.
They're just always angry. I mean, you go hop on YouTube right now and put Cape Buffalo versus. Okay?
Versus
anything. Okay? And I hope people that are listening will actually do this. Go type in, make sure you're not like, you don't have a meal coming up real fast, okay? But it's Cape Buffalo versus, right? And so, and I said, what about lions? He goes, lions are lazy. He goes, we walk by lions in the middle of the day and they roll over, look at you. Hi, what's up? 4:30 in the afternoon when they're getting ready to feed.
Right.
You're like, you're nowhere near it. Right. And hippopotamuses are relatively slow. And when they're dangerous is when they're in the water, right? Which is more secluded. Mm-hmm. Cape buffalo is everywhere. Right. They're just ready. They're just ready for you. Right. And so I'm capturing the photo, their heads are in the mud. They're swinging the mud around. Yeah. I'm getting like my portfolio shots of the Cape buffalo. And then all of a sudden the lead one, the one with the big horns, he's like looking at us. And all of a sudden he makes this noise. He makes like this little noise, right? And the guy who's driving, he's like, can I have both of you sit down, please? And when he said that, the buffalo took one hoof, started towards us, right? Started coming towards us. And he goes, and he slowly started to back that S10 out. He goes, don't move, right? And we're sitting here like this. You want to have your heart rate, right? Go from, at this point, it's a normal 105 in the jungle to like 178, like within 10 seconds. Right. Imagine your best anxiety attack you've ever had comes on within 3 seconds. It was when we started to back that thing up. He starts making, and then 3 or 4 of the other ones all start walking towards us. And he's like, all right, guys, grab onto something. And that S10 started to back up a little faster. He whips her on the side, and the full coming right at you. And we pull away, and they lose interest. And I said, how close were we? I mean, he's been doing this for 30.
How close was I to dying right now?
And he's in 35 years, he goes, in 35 years, I'd say top 3, top 5 of us all pretty much leaving this planet. Because they don't, it's not like they're going to like chomp on you. No. They throw you around. You'll see it on the videos. They just beat you up. They're angry. They're like, why were you here? Why are you in my space? Yeah. I hated you before you got here. Okay, that's what these animals make me feel like.
They're going to break every single one of your bones.
Exactly, exactly. And go ahead and turn that video on because that sucker's going to go viral. Right. Okay, you want the internet sensation Cape Buffalo? It's going to be me. That's how I'm feeling. They're feeling. But there's very few times in my life that I've felt scared as I was like in that moment. And the other photographer, she was right beside me, and she was just like tears. I mean, it was a very, very emotional moment, but you meet some of the you meet one of the big 8, and I know one of the big 8 from the Nat Geo, like best of the best of the best of the world.
I think I might have met him with you. Was that the same
not
guy?
This one? This gentleman's in Israel.
Oh, okay.
So and I asked him about this, and he's like, this guy shoots, all the stuff you see on the BBC network, mating habits of the polar bears and stuff like that. That's him.
Right.
It's those type of shots. Oh, yeah, you're looking at the photo. She's got it pulled up right over here. That's the one. That's the actual photo.
Yeah.
And I end up, I ask him. I said, have you put yourself in these type of situations and roles? And he looked at me and he goes, "That's every day for me." I mean, this is Luke who does it.
Right.
Not
once or twice a year to different countries.
To different countries to do this stuff. This is what he does all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you ever get over the pure fear factor of what just happened? He's like, you don't, because if you're thinking about it, you'll never capture the photo. Mm-hmm. If you're thinking about it, you're never going to get that moment. Whether you're with a bear or whether you're with, alligators or whatever. You're never going to capture. If you are sitting or even thinking about that fear, you're going to miss the picture. You're going to miss the photo. And that taught me a lot.
But that fear can't leave you because you're still right next to an alligator.
I am. Yeah, it's right there.
But he's saying you just gotta dial in and focus on it.
And this guy, who's been doing it for 35 years, he said this Cape Buffalo, all he had to do was charge this little S10 truck. All he had to do was charge and barely hit it, and we would have just flipped.
Yeah.
And then it would have been game on for all of his friends.
Yep.
I want to be on the internet. That's kind of what it would have been like, right? And he's like, all they had to do was flip you once, and then it would have just been nuts from there.
Right.
So, but there's been a lot of awesome experiences. This past year, the past couple of years, been able to be on the sidelines for the Denver Broncos. I've shot for the Rockies.
Yeah.
Got hopefully some project work coming up for the Avalanche when they come in.
There you go.
Which brings me back into my sports. But when the pandemic hit, my 2 favorite things to photograph, live music and sports, gone. So all of a sudden, 80% of the stuff that I love to photograph the most that I'm really good at, completely gone. So I just pray that a lot of that stuff comes back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
So when I do get the camera back out, I can just take it to a whole new level.
Well, I know we're kind of getting low on time, but I did want to talk to you about some of the musicians you photographed, because you've photographed a lot of musicians. I know you mentioned Def Leppard earlier, and the Freedom Fest. We've done some work at Freedom Fest. What other musicians stick out to your mind? Where you're like, wow, I met them.
I met them.
I photographed that guy.
Like that.
Yeah.
I think of the most famous people that I've photographed, and was I ever starstruck with any of them? Bill Cosby.
Yeah,
was a little bit of a starstruck for me.
Yeah, for real.
Because he was right when I photographed him in the 80s. This is long before he went through a lot of bad stuff.
Right.
And, he was at the top of his game. A big name, and that's Mr. Huxtable, right? and that was a little starstruck moment for me.
He was huge in the 80s.
Yeah.
Huge.
And when you photographed a lot of famous people, it wears off. The factor wears off a little bit more.
He's just another person.
It's kind of another person. If you go to the 80s rockers like Kip Winger or Metallica, right, or other people, they become folks that you've And it's not like back then you weren't like taking selfies with them. There wasn't no such thing as a selfie, right?
Here, let me change my giant film
Can I change
camera?
that giant camera and flip it around? What you learn really quickly is that when you're photographing famous people is that, and this goes back to something my grandpa taught me, each one of them put their pants on the same way.
Right.
One leg at a time. And they're real people with real thoughts, real fears, real feelings. And some of them are really awesome, like Lita Ford, awesome lady rocker of the 80s, right?
She was awesome.
The whole band Vixen, awesome women rockers from the 80s. And then you got people who are, I don't want to trample on his grave because he's passed away, but like Eddie Money was the biggest jackass I've ever photographed in my life.
I could see it.
Oh yeah, two tickets to I don't know whose paradise, brother, but it's not yours. This guy was not. I mean, I can go through a lot of other people, and I've met classical piano players that I've photographed who were bigger jackasses than the coolest rapper.
Right.
That was like really fun to photograph. So it's still fun. Love photographing concerts and those types of events. There are still professionally people I'd love to photograph. It'd be fun to photograph JT. And still in his hype would be Justin Timberlake would be a blast. But still, as the older bands make it around, some of the bands that I've never gotten to photograph that I'd love to, like Kiss, and a few other
maybe the Stones.
Stones would have been would have been really awesome. It's been a lot of fun to photograph the famous folks and to get them live on stage. Night Ranger and a lot of these 80s rockers and stuff that have made their way through Colorado.
Yeah.
I love doing that and capturing those types of emotions.
That's awesome. And real quick too, tell me about your love for tea, because I know you kind of picked that up while you're traveling around the world, and you said you were living when you were in India, I believe, right?
It's kind of where it started.
Sort of started there.
I started loving tea and picking up different teas from around the world. Then I started not collecting them because I can't keep them fresh.
Right.
But I'm like, I fell in love with that tea, and so I'd buy a bunch of that tea here and then this tea there, and then I'd bring it home, and then I'm on like this massive internet search, right, to find all of these great teas. And the coolest tea moment that I've had, and I'll make it short, was I found some of this green tea that was very specific to a certain region in China. When I was spending time in China 2 years ago, and I brought that tea back, and I was literally like there's little tears in my eyes as the ending of the tea bags are coming. You can see how many more teas I get left, right, with this tea. And so I grabbed the packaging, which I can't read any of it. I have no clue what it says, and I walked it right into the one of the Asian markets over off of Federal Boulevard here in Colorado, and I walked it in, and just as you formally present in business, like you formally present the business card, I walked in and walked up to who I kind of looked like was the owner. I walked in and I nodded and I presented this to him, and he's like, and he basically brought over someone who was an interpreter. We don't have that tea here. He goes, but I know where to find it.
There you go.
And within a matter of 6 weeks, that guy had imported it in specially for me. I really didn't care how much it cost. I want that tea.
Right.
He imported it. I still can't read it. Still don't know what it is. Right. But then he put it out on his shelf. And now every time I go back over there, I smile. I grab that one. And I can continue my passion and my love for tea. And the coolest thing about these teas, Sterling, and I'll end with this on that topic, is every time I pull one of those tea bags out from that region of the world, wherever I was, from Australia to India to China, I pull that tea out, and when I'm making it, and as I'm starting to smell it, the olfactory moments in your nose, you can close your eyes and start to bring yourself back to remembering where you were when you first had that tea,
right,
and start to remember the memories of that country, the memories of those people, the memories of those experiences. And that's how I use tea to bring me back to the greatest memories of my international travels.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, memories are tied to scent in a lot of different ways. So
Absolutely.
that's awesome you do that. Well, thank you, Luke. Thank you so much. I learned a ton. I'm sure Alicia learned a ton. Look, she's in love.
This was a great day. There's so many fun things to talk about, and
Right.
And I just hope your listeners and the other folks that get a chance to listen to this, that my goal, especially when I'm doing keynote speeches and big speeches, is if someone took away one or two nuggets. Normally the nugget is that for those 3 columns. Everyone starts to make those 3 columns, right?
Yep.
They're like, oh my, I'm making those 3 columns and figuring out what I love to do. No matter what nugget they pulled out of this, our short time that we had together, hopefully they'll do something to really not just make their lives better, but make lives better for everyone else around them.
Yeah. And give us a little shout out. What's your Instagram and where can people find these photos you have?
Yeah. So a lot of the photography, so travelprophotos.com is the photography website. It's going to be going through a big reconstruction here in the first quarter of 2021. But Travel Pro Photos would be the website. And then just my name, Luke Wyckoff, Wyckoff. You just put the @ sign in front of that, and I'm easy to find on Instagram, and that's where you'll see a lot of the photography.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Luke.
Hey, this was
Good
awesome.
talking. Yeah,
Great
it's
to
awesome.
see you. Great to spend time with both of you today. It was an amazing day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Luke.